So good evening, everybody. This is a very, very exciting and important video that's going to go up on the channel this very evening. We're going to get it out immediately for you. I'm joined tonight by Dr. Vivek Trivedi and Dr. Robert Laurenson, the co-chairs of the UK Junior Doctors Committee, who are going to come on and talk to us about everything that's going on with the Junior Doctors Ballot for Industrial Action, why it's important, a bit of the background on why it's so important, and why, as a junior doctor, you need to be involved in voting. Thank you both for coming on.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
Vivek, do you want to start? It would be great just to hear a bit about your role and maybe how you came to be where you are.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Vivek. I'm an anaesthetic doctor in the Northwest. We're living up in Manchester and working up in Lancaster at the moment. I am the chair of the Northwest Regional Junior Doctors Committee in the BMA, and then through that I've become the co-chair of the BMA's UK Junior Doctors Committee. But pretty importantly, I've not really had a role like this within the BMA or any other union in the past. So yeah, this is all quite new and exciting, but I think that's part of the reason that's led this campaign forward and really helped it along. I'm sure there's many people who've been on the sidelines in the past couple of years, not happy with how things are going, moaning and whinging on Reddit. I can't say I've not been there. And, you know, there was a group of similar like-minded people that got together from all parts of the country and thought, if we don't like it, we need to change something about it. Why don't we be that change? And effectively, that's how I got involved. So yeah, got involved with Doctors Vote, grassroots organization, which was campaigning for a single issue for full pay restoration. And then through that, I've found myself to become co-chair of the BMA UK Junior Doctors Committee with Rob.
Very good. So Rob, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm a GPST3. I work in Kent and I live in London. And like Vivek and many other people, I've been really frustrated by the trend and the direction that our profession has gone in terms of conditions and pay. You know, what is training, right? What is the foundation program? How much training do we actually get, and how much of it is on sort of soft skills like resilience and leadership, etc., which doesn't really translate, I think, into making a doctor better listening and sitting down in those lectures. And when it came to pay and seeing how our pay has been under assault for so many years and looking at the direction of travel that we're going in, when I was reading about the Doctors Vote movement, I got a little bit excited. I thought there's a chance here, an opportunity here for a wide range of people to come together under one banner, under one cause, to push for and try and succeed in taking action to rectify something that I find and I feel is a major priority in improving doctors' lives.
That, I think, is a good springboard. Rob, you were going to take us through a bit of the background as to, so I think first we kind of need to understand our terms and our definitions, right, and understand how we got to where we are now, where doctors are in this position. Would you be able to take us through that?
Yeah, I can do a little bit of it. So doctors have lost about 26% of their pay over the last 15 years. And it's not just from the economic circumstances that the country finds itself in. Obviously, in 2008, we had a financial crisis. And in 2009, there was a report commissioned by the Department of Health and Social Care asking a global accountancy firm called McKinsey how to find efficiencies in the NHS. And what was abundantly clear was the efficiencies they were looking at was strictly economic. They weren't actually looking at healthcare outcomes, how to improve productivity, and how to motivate and help staff provide high quality healthcare. And in this document, it talks about abolishing state staffing ratios, creating a hiring freeze, which probably for us looks like the bottleneck that occurs at specialty training and the high competition ratios we have now, because there aren't enough posts. But also the document talks about asking people to do more for less, which is precisely what the 2016 contract was kind of fought around from the perspective of the government, and Jeremy Hunt's big sort of famous 24-hour, 7-day-a-week slogan that he was talking about, when everyone knew doctors already worked at that level. And even now, you know, it's not that contract change hasn't really changed and delivered what they wanted to do. And they even tried a couple of months ago to throw that same sort of tidbit into the news and just see how that narrative took hold. But what this report basically demonstrated and showed is over 15 years, our entire profession has been under assault in terms of having our pay eroded and cut. We were supposed to have an independent pay review body, but we all know that every year we had at the beginning, we had a public sector wage freeze imposed on us. And so the independent pay body review body was basically sidelined. And then we had them have to give recommendations under a remit of about 2% maximum. That immediately removes the independence of a pay body, and it completely compromises their remit and the whole point of them. So about 2016, George Osborne came out and said, we'll repair the roof whilst the sun is shining. But that never happened for us. They continued to cut our wages year after year after year. The multi-year pay deal, which we had around 2019 for 4 years, which is concluding in April, had a clause in it that talked about the fact that either the BMA, the government, or the DDRB themselves could unilaterally ask for another recommendation to be made. And given the unprecedented nature of both the pandemic and the sacrifices junior doctors made, as well as the cost of living crisis, the government made sure that this so-called independent pay body wouldn't make a pay recommendation. So for all the talk of the government having to make tough decisions because of unprecedented times, it's quite apparent that they exploited us at work during the pandemic, and then they've betrayed us afterwards by not looking after us and protecting us.
So that, I suppose, sets the scene in the background. So we have a decade plus of real terms pay cuts and slow erosion, and almost well, death by 1,000 cuts, if you like, isn't it? Erosion of the profession, rather than people. We're always talking about the NHS as a whole as if it's on the border of collapse. For example, it probably has already collapsed, depending on your perspective, but it's everyone's waiting for that final moment for everything to tip over. But we're not going to let that happen for doctors. So, Vivek, now that we've been through some of that political and economic background, why from a unionist's perspective, or why from a doctor's perspective, does that mean that we have to call for industrial action?
Yeah, so as Rob was saying, this is on the background or in the context of having a real terms pay cut year after year, despite our workload going up, despite burnout going up, despite the demand for our services going up. And we've been faced with real terms pay cut. In this most recent year, with inflation above 10, 12, even 14%, if you look at RPI, a 2% uplift, which is what we got, means that we, junior doctors, were effectively working a month for free. That is a direct correlation to how the government value us, and they don't value their workforce in the NHS. They probably don't value the NHS, and that is leading to a number of consequences, specifically for doctors, increasing burnout, driving doctors away.
Mm-hmm.
Pay and working conditions are the root of almost every doctor's grievances, and pay is a huge undermining commonality for these things, as Rob was saying. So we have tried, and the BMA has tried to rectify this, have written to the Secretary of State, written to the Department of Health, multiple letters, multiple calls to try and address this issue, to even start a dialogue about reversing pay. But we've been met with nothing but silence, repeated letters, and nothing in return. We're hoping to reach a solution without needing to use industrial action, but we've been left with no choice. There is nothing else that we can do to have our voice heard. So we're going to be exercising our legal right to strike, because that's the only action that we have left, and it is a tool in our arsenal, and we need to show our collective strength and use that tool. So we will be balloting junior doctors from Monday, the 9th of January, for a period of 6 weeks to participate in a vote to strike. And it's a vote to support pay restoration, and it's a vote to support the profession.
So that brings us up to where we are. So it's currently the evening of Thursday, the 5th of January. That balloting period opens this coming Monday, as you've said, the 9th of January, and runs for 6 weeks. There will be still, hopefully it's a small number of people, but there will still be a number of people who are perhaps not members of the BMA, have never thought about being part of a trade union before, but they may still want to be involved. Even though we're kind of so close to the wire, can they still get involved?
100%. So it's not too late to join the BMA and to get a ballot and to have your voice heard. The first rounding of ballot printing is underway, and they will be sent out next week, but it's not too late. So if you're not a member of the BMA, please join. Make sure your home address is correct, because ballots are postal. That's a legal obligation for with trade union law. If a ballot goes to the wrong address and it's unanswered, it will count against us. There are strict trade union laws requiring us to get a 50% turnout for a ballot to be valid. Regardless of how people vote, we need at least 50% of members to respond for it to be considered. So it's hugely important that you're a member and that your address is up to date, so that when you get a ballot, you can send it back, and you send it back in good time. The ballot closes on the 20th of February, and your vote needs to be at Civica, which is the company that organizes it, on the morning of the 20th. Anything that arrives there after midday will not be counted, regardless of when you sent it. So don't delay and send.
So one of the most common things that I am getting asked by people up and down the country is can medical students be involved in this industrial action?
Strike action is very specific to people who actually have a contract with an employer. It's all about withdrawing your labor. So as a student, you wouldn't be balloted and you wouldn't be formally taking part in industrial action, but there are an awful lot of things that you can do to support doctors and not undermine action. Obviously, a lot of students will probably have some concerns about the kind of educational aspects of their placements and how that might be affected. There will be doctors on the picket lines and in demonstrations, which you can attend, and we would encourage you to attend as a sign of support and solidarity. It may be possible to be talking to junior doctors about clinical topics that interest you, or anything about the NHS, or even social things as well, which can then create relationships and friendships where you might be able to gain educational opportunities. Okay, that's the first thing. The other things that you can try and do to support would be to show your support for junior doctors on the picket lines. Try and bring some hot drinks, hot food if you can, because the first couple of months may still be quite cold. We would encourage people to try and not undermine the action by trying to go into work and working outside of their competencies and in trying to deliver patient care. There are some difficult ethical and legal implications in doing so. If you're not competent and you're working outside of your competencies and something were to happen to a patient, that puts you in a very difficult position. But also it might work towards undermining junior doctor action, which would be trying to undermine some of the sacrifices that junior doctors will be taking to secure the future of the profession and to secure the future of the career that medical students are about to undertake.
Do you think it's possible, Rob? I mean, we did see whisperings of this during the nursing strikes that happened recently, where medical students may be asked either above or below the table to come in and kind of softly provide assistance with what's going on the wards.
Absolutely. It will be a mechanism that employers will use to try and keep services functioning as best they can. The action that we're trying to bring about will be safe for patients, because consultants and specialist associate doctors will be able to step down and fill our gaps. There is sometimes some red tape associated with nurses who are competent at venipuncture and other tasks, but are told that they're not signed off in this trust. We know from previous strike action, not just in this country, but others, where actually some of that red tape was removed in order to improve and increase patient flow. So please don't try and undermine our action by participating in activities that might be trying to deliver healthcare. It's not necessarily safe, and it's not necessarily the best thing for the profession either.
Thank you. So Vivek, to return to you then, one of probably the most common questions that people will be asked about and will have directed at them by the general public often is, surely doctors have a moral duty not to strike or to do anything that would place patients at risk. It's a vocation. We all opted to do this, for the benefit of patients, and some number of us took an oath and all of these things.
Yeah, so I sympathize with that concern, because like most of the people watching this, like myself, like most other doctors that will be voting yes to strike, we don't want our patients to come to harm. But if anyone's been in a hospital lately, they'll have seen the long waiting lines that there are in A&E to see a doctor. They'll have met people who are waiting not just 1, but now more than 2 years, some even more, for operations, because of the 7 million people on the waiting list for surgeries. They'll know how hard it is to get a GP appointment. They'll know how hard it is to get a secondary care appointment. We've all seen the graphs about these different trajectories of how patient care is going in the NHS, and it's going downhill. And that is for a number of reasons, but the workforce crisis that is occurring because of a failure to retain and recruit doctors is a huge part of that. So we need to do something to address that. We need to fix that retention issue. We know that pay is a huge driving factor against retention. So let's help restore the value to the profession, to entice people to stay, to ensure, to make the NHS a competitive employer again, so that we can provide that good service that we used to. No one wants patients to come to harm, but they are coming to harm. And unless we do something, they will come to more harm. And the second part of that, which I'd just like to say, is that so junior doctors withdrawing care, we're fortunate in the position that we're not the only doctors in the hospital. There are consultants, there are specialty doctors, there are other doctors. And what we saw in 2016 and what we've seen in various other junior doctor strikes around the world is that patient care actually improves when junior doctors strike. And that's because these senior doctors, these senior specialists, highly skilled doctors are brought into the acute services to manage that workload where the junior doctors have left. And they provide who would have thought these senior skilled clever doctors know how to treat patients, and they provide a good level of care, better level of care arguably than maybe junior doctors do. So in the immediate setting, patient care improves, and like we've seen from data from 2016 and other junior doctor strikes around the world, that patient mortality did not increase in 2016 and various other strikes around the world.
I think that means that we have to discuss, because the obvious question will be, if all your junior doctors walk out and nobody comes to harm, then clearly you should all be sacked anyway, because it's not making any difference. But perhaps, Rob, I think the important thing that we need to drill into is elective activity, right?
Precisely, exactly. So the aim of industrial action is not to kill and maim people. I mean, that's just obscene, and that's cruel, and that's not what any of us got into this job to do. But industrial action needs to cause a level of disruption, and junior doctors are critical in ensuring that flow and services can function in a hospital as well as in community settings. If consultants and specialist associate doctors are having to step down to provide emergency cover on the front door and in the wards, which is where junior doctors work, primarily and provide the vast majority of our service, and our invaluable service at that, then a lot of the elective procedures and lists and clinics will not be able to function. Now, like I said, we're keen to preserve life, and we're keen to demonstrate the value that we have to the functioning of the healthcare system. During the pandemic, we were critical workers, and I think it's about time that the government actually recognizes that, instead of pursuing on this deliberate action of trying to slash our wages year after year. And just to add on to what Vivek was saying about patients coming to harm at the moment when there is no strike action, we've just gone through a period over the last couple of weeks where there's absolute chaos and turmoil happening in A&E departments up and down the country. And the Royal College of Emergency Medicine came out recently to suggest that there were about 500 excess deaths happening because of the underfunding and the undercapacity of the NHS, primarily driven through a workforce crisis. We've got a tremendous cohort of junior doctors now who are coming out with two different philosophies. There's one which is the F3 and flee. And I know you've talked about the F3 phenomenon on your channel, Ollie, but the idea that people are fleeing the country and fleeing the NHS, that's driven out of fear. That's a push verb. That's not a verb where people are being attracted to another place, another industry. They're running away from the NHS because it's so dire. And I think that speaks volumes for the position that actually we find ourselves in. And strike action is just trying to demonstrate our value through the absence of our work. If we didn't have the ability to go on strike to demonstrate that and to bring the government to the table and highlight the conversation in the national media, then what will just happen is people would take these opportunities to F3 and flee or CCT and flee, and we would just have a silent form of strike action, and people would be coming to harm over a longer period of time because we just wouldn't have a healthy, functioning health sector.
I think something that I don't know what your guys' experience of this has been, but something that often gets lost, I think, in the dialogue is it's although we're not very good at measuring it, clearly it's very expensive to train junior doctors. I don't think anyone would argue that it isn't. It takes an enormous amount of resource in order to prepare your doctors, as exactly you would hope it would, right? You want someone who is very well trained, very well experienced, because you're looking after people's lives. And although people differ on exactly how much that value is, I don't think we have a good estimate. The general public, when I speak to them about this, are clearly acutely aware that it's very expensive to train junior doctors. And I'm often a bit dismayed at how quickly we arrive back at, well, you should all be forced to work in the NHS for however many years anyway, which is a view that I think Jeremy Hunt totted out before, didn't he? Not that it ever went anywhere. But perhaps what people don't realize is that through these silent forms of protest that you've just laid out, through an F3 and flee, through a CCT and flee is devastating to the UK health system. If you think of how long that takes to get somebody to being a specialist or a consultant.
Precisely, and it's obscene. You know, if we're going to be investing in people to go through training and education, then we should be investing in them to retain them and keep hold of them. Why are we investing to train a cohort of doctors who wants to either go into another industry altogether or leave the country and go work in another healthcare sector? It doesn't quite add up. And that's a massive inefficiency. So when the government talk about efficiency savings and wanting to make the NHS more efficient, there's nothing more inefficient than losing your entire investment to go somewhere else. Then there's the other side of things, right? Which is, you know, not just talking about the pay that a doctor receives, but the value that a doctor produces through their output for the economy. So a sick patient, a poorly person, is not going to be as productive as when they were operating at their maximum health. And a sick population is an unproductive population. An unproductive population is a sick economy. So if we can invest in our healthcare system, if we can get down those waiting lists, if we can get down the crises that are happening in A&E as well, and we can start to help people get back to the best health that they can be, so that they can have a good quality of life, they can work, they can be productive, you get a return on that investment in healthcare. So there's really good sort of general economic arguments for our cause as well.
Thanks very much for coming on, guys. That's where we'll wrap it, but I really appreciate your time, and thanks for coming on. See you all soon.